Hi, welcome to Train Signal. My name's Bill and this lesson is Farm Configuration Revisited. Now you're probably asking yourself, Bill, why do we need to revisit the farm configuration? Didn't we do that already? And the answer is yes, you're exactly right. But let's be honest, during the installation, we move through the process fairly quickly. And that's fine if you only want to go ahead and do a default installation of SharePoint, which is great for a lab environment, a test environment, and we've talked about this. But typically, production environments typically require a lot more manual configuration of your SharePoint farm. And throughout the rest of this course, we're going to go ahead and discuss a lot of those things in great detail. So, make sure you keep watching the rest of the course to learn more about that. But in this lesson, we're going to go back, we're going to run the farm configuration wizard again, because we want to go through and take a closer look at it, do it a little bit slowly, and talk about not only what it's doing, but how and why. We're also going to visit some new concepts, well, not all entirely new. We're also going to talk about managed accounts, and we've already done those, we've created those, but now we want to go back and we're going to talk about what they do and look at them a little bit more closely. We're also going to talk about service applications in a little bit more detail, and I'm going to throw a new term at you, application proxies, so you have a little bit of a better understanding. We want to go ahead and use this lesson to get a little more comfortable with the terminology and the architecture that's involved before we go ahead and advance onto some more detailed subject matter. So let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, the first place we are going to go, and as you're looking, you're saying, wait a minute, this doesn't look like our SharePoint server, and you're right, it's not. This is our SQL server. Because what we want to do is we're going to go to our SQL Server Management Console, and I want to show you our database. We didn't look at it before, but I want to make you aware that there it is. There is the two databases, and if you remember, when we did our SQL install, we did look in here at our Management Studio, and these databases were not there. But here they are. We created these both during the installation of SharePoint. This is Central Admin, and this is the database for the SharePoint configuration. And from time to time, we'll come back here and take a look at our SQL Server Management Studio so that we can see other databases as we create them, because we are going to create a few more before this course is done. But now let's go ahead and let's get over to our SharePoint server and take a look at Central Administration. Okay, so here we are in Central Administration. And as we take a look down here, I want you to notice Configuration Wizards. Let's go ahead and let's click there. And we see the only one we have is the Farm Configuration Wizard, which we've already seen, yes, but we are going to run through it again in just a few minutes. But this is how we can go ahead and go back to it. Let's get back to Central Administration again, and let's click on Application Management. And in here we see that we have web applications, site collections, service applications, and these are listed in the logical order of importance. And as you can see, this is where we're going to go when we need to manage these features. And we will be in here plenty throughout this course. Now what I want us to do is start up here. We're going to take a look at managing web applications. And we come in here and the only one we see is our SharePoint Central Administration. Now remember, we have taken a step back. We've taken us to the point before we ran the Farm Configuration Wizard. And that's why there's only this one web application in here, and it's tied to this very site. Take a look here, you see the URL, and you'll also see our port binding. Remember, we selected that port, 12345. Take a look up here, and you'll see our URL. And after we run the Farm Configuration Wizard, we will see more in here. And actually, throughout the course, in a future lesson, we will go ahead and we're actually going to create two more web applications. Now, don't get hung up on what exactly web applications are. We're going to get in more detail about that in a future lesson. Hang in there with me, gang. It's going to take us a little while to get all caught up, but once we do, all of this is going to start to fall into place. And this is why I told you we wanted to step back so we could start digging a little bit deeper and getting a little bit more comfortable with our terminology and a little more information about exactly what we're doing. Now, what I want to do is take us into IIS, Internet Information Services, and take a look at our web application there. So let's go ahead and let's open up our IIS Manager. There we go. And we'll open this up, click on Sites, and see that there is our central administration site. And you can already see in there our port bindings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the port that we selected, remember? And actually, if we right click on it and edit bindings, you also see it there. And just so we're clear, the bindings are set by default to the port and not to the URL. And let's go ahead and let's take a look at application pools. And we see the application pool for our SharePoint Central Administration. And don't get hung up on what application pools are if you're not really sure yet, if you don't know that stuff. We will talk about them in greater detail in another lesson. We're going to talk a great deal about web applications. We'll talk about application pools, and we'll have a little bit deeper discussion about that right now. But right now I wanted you to see this, and I wanted you to recognize that we didn't set this up, did we? We didn't go ahead and we didn't create this application pool. We didn't create this site. It was done for us through the SharePoint installation wizard. And we appreciate that, don't we? It saved us a lot of work. So let's go ahead. We're good here. Let's close this and let's get back to our central administration. And I want to show us one more thing before we go ahead and run that farm configuration wizard again. So let's go back to application management. And this time, let's take a look at managing service applications. And now we see only 2 service applications. Remember when we ran the wizard, I took you in here, all of those service applications that we had selected. And we'll see that again after we run the wizard again, but it only gets these 2 service applications up and running. The application discovery and load balancer service application and the security token service application. So now let's go ahead and let's go back to central administration and let's run our farm configuration wizard. Okay, launch the farm configuration wizard. We've seen this before. We're going to start our wizard, yes. The first thing we have to deal with in our farm configuration wizard is selecting a service account. It tells us right here, use an account that's different from the farm administration account. So we'll go ahead and we'll select use existing managed account, and we go to our list and we see that we don't have any other managed accounts beside the farm account. When we did this before, we went ahead, we had create new managed account selected, and we put in that SP service account in here, and it added it as a managed account. And that's fine, that's perfect. That was a great way to do it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to go and do this manually. So let's go back to central administration. We're going to click down here on security. And in here you'll see we have configure managed accounts. So let's click there. And it brings us here to our managed accounts. And we see indeed the only one there is our GlobalMantics SP Farm account. So we want to go ahead and register a new managed account. So we'll click there. And here we start getting a little bit more information. Our account registration. Service accounts are used by various farm components to operate. We knew that already. We've talked about this. The account password can be set to automatically change on a schedule and before any scheduled Active Directory enforced password change event. That's the key to these managed accounts. We talked about this a little bit previously, but I want you to think of the reality of dealing with this manually. We talked about the possibility of having an individual service account for every single service application. You could certainly do that. And remember how many service applications there were. That's a lot of service accounts. And whatever your password enforcement is in Active Directory, you would have to deal with that manually. So think about that. Think about the reality of trying to go ahead and manage those password changes every 30 days or every 60 days or whatever it is, whatever your policy is, one by one. And think about if you leave and then somebody else has to try and figure out what that is and when those need to be changed. It could be a big nightmare. What managed accounts do in SharePoint, SharePoint has the ability to go ahead and configure permissions for any identity assigned to a service application. It also can change passwords for managed accounts in Active Directory and for SharePoint. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. We're going to add in that SP service account, put in our password, and let's take a look down here at automatic password change. Automatic password change enables SharePoint to automatically generate new strong passwords on a schedule you set. So if we click here to enable our automatic password change, it's going to detect if the password expiry policy is detected, change the password, and you can make this, it's 2 days by default. You can make it 1 day, 3 days, whatever is convenient. And you can even enable notification by email. So you would get an email, and in this case, it's 5 days before that password change is going to happen, so that you know it's coming. And then you can go ahead and set the date, the time even, when you want it to go ahead and start. Now, let's go ahead, let's turn this off for right now, and let's click OK so that we can register that account. And there is the SP service account. And notice that there's no password change schedule because we didn't enable that. But I want us to go ahead here, click on Edit, and now, see this? Now that it is a registered account, I can go ahead in and set to change those passwords. And again, we have the same options here for time and email if we so choose. So that's pretty cool. And I know a lot of you are probably out there thinking, ooh, that's scary, letting SharePoint handle my passwords. It's okay. It's going to be just fine. Typically what happens is either the password policy for service accounts is ignored or people try to do it manually. And again, we talked about that. The reality of trying to handle it manually can be overwhelming, and you're really, really likely to have problems, which, nobody likes problems, do they? All right, so we're good here. Let's go ahead and let's go back to our configuration wizard. We're going to launch our farm configuration wizard again. Now we're going to select Use Existing Manage Account, and when we select our drop-down, we see that our SP service account is indeed there. Great. So that worked out really well. Now let's go ahead and let's go back one more time to security. And let's take a look. Well, let's take a look at this one. And notice that right now there are no farm components using this account, and there's no password update information. But if we go ahead and go back and look at our SP farm, see that it's giving us all of the farm components that are being run using that farm account. And this is important because if you get into a situation where you're not sure which service account is working with which services, this is where you can go ahead and find out. All right. I know, back to the configuration wizard, and I know by now you're probably getting tired of me coming back here and teasing you with the starting of the configuration wizard, but now we are just about ready to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit more about our service applications. Now we've already taken a look at our service applications. We talked about them during our install lesson. I went through, showed you the list. We talked a little bit about each of them. I went into greater detail on some of my favorites, and we made our selections. But I want to talk a little bit more about these service applications and their connection to the web application. Our service applications are running unboxed. They are independent of each other. Some of our service applications can be shared between SharePoint farms. Not all of them, but there are a few. And for each service application, there is an application connection, sometimes called a proxy. This creates the connection point for the application. In other words, there is this invisible connection between the service application and the web application. Now, each web application usually has multiple service applications, and this creates an application connection group or a proxy group. And this is a logical grouping of application connections. This isn't something we can see or that we can reach out and manipulate or configure, but it is something that exists, and you're probably never going to need to know this again. You may hear the terms come up, and I just want you to make sure you understand that connection between the web applications and the service applications. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make our choices. We're going to, I'll tell you what, let's pretty much, let's take off the machine translation service, take off our performance point. I think the rest of this, we can get rid of Visio and work. No, we'll leave workflow on. And I think that this will be just fine. So let's go ahead and select next, and we will wait while our farm configuration wizard does its job. But I'm not going to make you sit here and wait. I'm going to pause our recording and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Here we are at Create a Site Collection, and that's great. That means everything went well. We didn't get the something went wrong screen, which is always a plus. And this is where we ended our installation lesson, if you recall. We didn't create a site collection. We're going to now. We're going to go ahead and put this site collection in here. We're not going to go into great detail because we will have a lesson a little bit later on about creating site collections. We're going to go ahead and create 2 more, and we will go into much more detail about the site collections. We'll take a look at managed paths and host headers and all of that great stuff. But for right now, let's go ahead and let's give this site a name. I'm going to call this Globomantics Main. We could give it a description, but we're not going to. Website address, we're going to simply leave it just like it is. We'll leave it at 2013, although we could roll it back to 2010. But remember, this is a brand new farm, so we don't have any old instances of SharePoint that we have to deal with. And our site is simply going to be a simple, very basic, everybody's favorite team site. So we will click OK. Whoops, we forgot to put in the name. So what we will do is put in main. My bad. We'll go ahead and click OK. There we go, and it is working. So again, this might take a little bit of time, so let me pause and we'll be right back. And this completes the farm configuration wizard. Looks pretty good. We see all of our service applications. And if we go ahead, scroll down, it will tell us to click finish to go back to central administration. But what I want us to do, let's take a quick peek. We're going to go back. Well, you know what? We can do it that way. Let's go ahead and just click finish. That'll take us back to central admin. We're going to go to security, configure our managed accounts. Let's take a look at our SP service managed account. And remember when we looked at this before, there were no service applications using this account, and now, boy, we got a whole bunch of them, don't we? That's exactly what we wanted to see. So that's okay. Let's get back to central administration. Let's take a look at managing our web applications, and now we see that SharePoint 80, it used the default port of 80. And this is the web application that was created when we ran the farm configuration wizard. And remember, we created that Globomantics main site collection. All right, let's go ahead and let's get back to central administration. And let's go ahead and let's go back to our IIS manager. Take a look now at our sites, and now we see the SharePoint 80 site. That's that default site collection that we created when we ran the farm configuration wizard. So that's great. We didn't have to go into IIS to do that. Let's go ahead and let's get into application management, and let's view all site collections. And we see already there's the site we just created, that Globomantics main site. And there we go. We got to make sure we're on the right one. Globomantics main. And there's the URL. Let's go ahead and let's copy that. We'll open up a new tab in our browser. We will paste and go. And look at that. There is our very first site. How about that? Now, we're not going to spend any time in here. I just wanted to show you that it worked. We made a site collection. We created a team site. We created a new web application. And I know we didn't go into great detail about those processes, but we will as we go forward. All right, and before we finish up, I'm going to take you to one more place. We're going to go back and take a look at our SQL Server. So hang in there with me. All right, let's go ahead. We are back in our SQL Server Management Studio. We'll connect to the database engine, and when we open up our databases, well, look at that. There's quite a few more than we had before, aren't there? If you remember the last time, all we had were SharePoint config and the central admin database, but now look at all of these. We have our content database, all of these databases for all of the different service applications. A lot of databases were created, and it was pretty simple. We didn't have to do any of it. SharePoint did it for us. Well, and that's it for this lesson. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.